which is described in fairy tales and myths, giant 100-meter sequoias. This is the picture our mind draws when we hear the words fairy forest. Let's think about the sequoias in California and the prism of matrix forces, otherwise our mind's protectors will melt, because Devil's Tower is actually a 6-kilometer high tree. But realize that Devil's Tower is a young plant compared to other trees on our planet. For example, this mountain in Cape Town in Africa is really impressive. This plateau is 3 kilometers in diameter. If we multiply 3 by 20, we will get a tree of 60 kilometers high. Do you have any clue how big its branches are? On one of the branches you could easily place a huge residential area with all the shopping malls, schools, and parks. Just imagine how huge it is. Of course, your mind will never see that this mountain in Africa is really a tree that is 10 times higher than the Devil Tower tree, 60 kilometers higher. But guess what? That's not the limit. In the work of Russian scientist and poet Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin, we can read about giant fairy oaks that was on the Bayan Island near Lokomori, and we now believe has been killed by our government. That oak was supposed to be the center of the earth and was some 100 kilometers high. Not sure how high, but for sure higher than the Cape Town one. This oak was the biggest plant on Earth. Remember in the beginning I mentioned our prism of the mind that helps to preserve it but distorts reality? Ask any person to show you trees on the right photo, and he will immediately put his finger on the green on the ground. Without noticing that it's only pathetic bushes, it looks more like moss in comparison to this size. But definitely not a forest. Now you understand why we can't find 9 dolphins? But do not dwell on fish and stumps. Once again, I urge you to think in planetary sizes. If instead of dolphins and stumps, we see lovers and mountains, imagine what is hidden from us with a curtain. That is why the apocalypse is translated as curtain opening. Do you understand now why I mentioned this matrix prism in the beginning? Through which we are looking, and it turned out that we see nothing. The real world is different. I can call today's state of society a real dream, and the sad part is it is not figurative. You know, in the Russian language, the word tree is spelled D-E-R-E-V-O, de-re-vo. The word ancient tree is spelled de-re-vo, and the word ancient trees is spelled de-re-nost. It means in Russian language, the language of the Aryans, time, when giant old trees grew. Interesting, isn't it? Well, let's put all that in our pocket and continue our flight. I think you will ask me, and maybe it's time to ask questions. Who cut down this forest? Why did they cut it? What did they use it for? No, it is too early to ask that. We know that the whole face of the planet was covered by giant vegetation. So we can ask ourselves, where did all the other forests go? The thing is that this so-called mesa are just single ones, because only the best were chosen for cutting. Whole other forests of the planet were laid down by blast waves. We reviewed only stumps with flat peaks. Does anyone remember how not cut but actually broken trees look like? I will remind you. Understand my hint? Let's play the game again. Find 10 differences. I think you understood the meaning of my words. So I want you to look at the highest stumps of our planet. They were mined like a quarry and were broke by blasts. For example, the tree Everest. Have you already guessed? There are no such things as rocks on our planet. They are all just pieces of broken stumps. You can look at millions of photos, but the only thing that you will find is corpses of our true environment. How official science explains our origin of rocks, I think you guessed too. Now you understand why we are so charmed by rock, why are all elite properties placed between rocks, why the most clean materials for construction are pieces of rock. Because even if they are dead, they still emit powerful energy for us, mortal carbon human beings. Stone is a bridge between silicon and carbon life forms. And now, the important thing you must learn is how to distinguish rocks from mountains. They are completely different things. Rocks consist of solid pieces of ragged stone with fragments of fibers that reach to the sky. But mountain is just a pile of loose waste, which were brought on by giant machines. It has almost perfect cone shape, like every loose structure does. Sometimes those piles have chemical wastes inside, and sometimes those wastes react with each other, and sometimes they burn, and sometimes explode. And then nerds in white coats scream that they invented a new volcano, and will immediately tell you stories from the crypt. How 200 million years ago this volcano formed those silicon stumps, and explain the origin of our street sidewalk tiles as a result of an ancient volcanic eruption. That is why there's no such thing as volcanoes, rocks, and mountains on our planet. You can throw out these terms from your vocabulary. Okay, let's fly further. So from our window you saw that absolutely all the rocks on our planet are just corpses of the silicon form of life. They are all fallen trees, you want to ask? No, not all of them have hexagonal structure like the Devil's Tower. Some of these rocks have lamellar structure or spongy structure, like our mushrooms do. Like liver is different from our heart or our lung, so our ancient world was so diverse that we can't identify or even imagine lots of species structure like our mushrooms do. Like liver is different from our heart or lung, so our ancient world was so diverse that we can't identify or even imagine lots of species and subspecies. Let me introduce this theme was covered in detail by Pavel Ulyanov. His YouTube name is Wake Up Humans. He did revolutionary work in the theme of geology and bucket wheel excavations work. Let me introduce to you this giant cuttlefish, which is a Badger 288, one of the world's biggest rotor excavators. And this is how those machines work. They crawl on its wheel parallel to the quarry wall. Giant wheels with ladles scratch at rock and ground, leaving concave wall. Geologists must be hypnotized in schools while they are students, because why else would they call quarry waste miracle of nature? Like, for example, this cliff in Australia. Want to laugh? If you do not believe in the idiocy of this last stage, just Google wave rock and check the official explanation. 100% unbelievable how people buy into this. Some people will ask which stone was part of the living plant and which not. I want to tell you that at least 7,500 years ago there were no such things as stones. Everything you find now was part of our ecosystem. But then people said they want to be gods themselves, and they screwed everything up. I want to ask you, open your minds. They live, we sleep. But they not only live, they're also killing our planet. They are doing it right now, while you're watching this. Wake up, humans. You must review all the instruction they gave you in elementary school, middle school, high school, history, geography, geology. Open your mind. I want you to look at these photos. Today we have lots of artifacts which we can't repeat because of certain conditions as the lack of technology, lack of equipment, or specialists, and which are evidence that our civilization is 200 years ago, and before that compared to us was way more developed, and today's society are just kids in the sandbox. Here are some examples. Bubbleovo Bath, 1784 to 1820. Here is what this man that was near it tells us. Sorry for my language, but they are telling us absolute bullshit. That somehow the master made it for 7 years and polished it every day like Papa Carlo. Absolute bullshit.